single day, like I've always done and always will.
Passing these bills on the floor, making yet another stand.
Welcome to this week's edition of New York Now. I'm Chantel Destra. Among the many priorities being floated as leaders negotiate the final state budget, labor advocates and state lawmakers are hoping to include the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. This is a tax credit that would be given to employers if and when they hire people from specific groups. The groups include veterans, summer youth employees, and ex-felons, among others. While this is a measure that was first introduced in the legislature back in 2021, lawmakers are hopeful it will be included in the state budget this year. This is because of growing support at the state capitol. To understand the impact and logistics of the Work Opportunity Tax Credit, we sat down with Assembly Labor Committee Chair Harry Bronson. Here's that discussion. Thank you so much for joining me here today, Assemblymember. It's my understanding that you've been pushing for the Work Opportunity Tax Credit in this year's state budget. So can you give our viewers some insight into that tax credit and how it might impact their lives?
Absolutely. That's related to my overarching objective, which I had both when I was chair of the Economic Development Committee and now that I'm chair of the Labor Committee. And that is, how do we create opportunities for folks? And in particular, how do we bring folks who have been on the economic and workforce sidelines for far too long? How do we bring them into the economy and help them participate as middle-class wage earners? So the Work Opportunity Tax Credit would mirror the parameters that exist under a federal tax credit that sets forth a number of criteria. So it would be veterans, people with disabilities, people in a household that is living on Social Security income, or folks who are on SNAP benefits, or folks who are disconnected both from education and the workforce. So this would offer a tax credit and incentivize and encourage businesses to hire those folks. And if they do, they get a tax credit. So our proposal is going to be $30 million for a 3-year period. So that would be a $90 million investment to encourage the hiring of folks who have been marginalized in the past. This measure is supported by the Business Council, it's supported by labor unions, and it's supported by organizations representing people with disabilities and organizations representing veterans.
And it's my understanding that this measure was first introduced a few years back in 2021, and there's been a consistent push around it in the years since. So what makes this year different? Why are you hoping that it gets passed this year?
Well, the Assembly is going to be pushing the measure. I'm going to be leading in that push. But we have a coalition of folks who have joined us. There are a lot more labor unions who are now supported. We have the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, Asian caucus. This is part of their people's agenda. So they have joined us. And so, I think with both the Business Council, labor, the caucus, and others supporting this, we have a good chance of getting it done this year.
And as the executive chamber and legislative leaders, negotiate the state budget this year, what are you excited about in terms of labor? What are you looking forward to in the One House budget proposals, for example?
There are a lot of things. One is workforce development. So those programs, I'm a huge supporter of the apprenticeship model of training workers because you get paid while you're getting trained. You don't have to forego getting a paycheck while you're learning how to do the job. So we have those in the construction trades, advanced manufacturing, which is really key because we have Micron coming to the state. We have a number of areas, including Rochester, my area, designated as high-tech hubs. All of that will require significant training. We have funded that in the budget. We're also going to fund in our One House the Climate Jobs Institute, which is a program run by Cornell that will make sure as we transition to the green economy, another opportunity we have in our economy right now, when we make that transition, it's a just transition. Just from a standpoint of if you have workers in the fossil industry, how do we upskill them so that they can work in the green energy? Also, how can we now take advantage of folks who have been on the sidelines and marginalized, how do we get them training so they can participate in the green economy? So workforce development is key in funding those programs across the state. Also, we have a huge proposal, the unemployment insurance. As many people know, back in 2020, because of COVID, we had to borrow money from the federal government to pay our unemployment insurance benefits. When you borrow money from the federal government, which you're obligated to do because this is a federal and a state program, then you can no longer increase benefits as long as that debt exists. So benefits for people going on unemployment insurance has not increased since the 2019 rates. And we had a scheduled increase to get it to average weekly wage and then index thereafter after 2026. So what we're proposing is let's pay off the debt. It's a $7 billion cost. That's huge. But it benefits workers and it benefits employers, in particular, small employers. So right now, to pay the interest off, employers are assessed an interest payment, right? The governor's proposal is to pay down that interest in June of this year. That's in her budget. It's $165 million. That doesn't go far enough. We need to pay off this debt, and we need to do it quickly because there are real concerns. Our economy may go in a downturn or very much possibly in a recession, given the steps that President Trump is currently taking. So our proposal, $7 billion pay off the debt. Plus, we're going to increase the benefits, the weekly benefits, so that it will mirror what they would have been if we had stayed on the schedule of increases. We're also going to reduce the wait period that individuals that go out on legal strikes, it used to be 7 weeks wait for them. In I think 2020 or 2022, we reduced that down to several weeks. We want to get it down so that their wait period is the same as any other worker who goes on unemployment insurance, which is a 7-day period. Then in addition, another benefit change that we want to make, and we're going to propose in our One House budget, is to make sure that when teachers and higher education faculty members, if they have a break in service, whether it's in between academic years for the summer and things of that nature, that we need some language changes so that they're entitled to receive unemployment insurance. So that's a really big thing that's going to be in the budget that's labor specific. Workers' compensation, we may end up having some discussion. We're going to reject the proposals made by the governor simply because they don't have a fiscal component to them. They're really policy. But if we end up negotiating workers' comp, we have some ideas on how to improve the workers' comp system. And then lastly, another big item is the temporary disability insurance benefits. We came very close to getting that in the budget last year. We were not successful in getting a 3-way agreement. We're looking forward to having those negotiations again. Temporary disability insurance covers a person who is injured outside the job, but they get paid through what we call TDI, temporary disability insurance. Currently, that weekly amount is only $170. We need to get that increase, and so we're going to try to get that through the budget as well.
And thinking back to last year, I think when I look at the labor priorities, there was a large focus on protections for warehouse workers, nail salon workers, things of that nature. So how are you hoping to build on those efforts this year?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. So we have done, fashion workers protection, warehouse injury protections, a bill I carried. This year, we're going to be focusing on what we call the temp bill. This would require provisions to be put in by employers to address extreme heat in the workplace, whether the workplace is inside or outside. So we're looking right now to get further comments from folks. I've been visiting and met with the folks in the agriculture industry, in the warehouse industry, in the trucking industry, so that we can come together and put together a bill that really works. Everybody agrees we have to keep our workers safe from heat. exposure, extreme heat exposure. In fact, in my area, there was a young man who just started a construction job. His father got him the construction job. He died of heat exposure within a week. We can't have that happening on our job sites, so we're working to get this done. It's also vitally important we do this year because at the federal level through OSHA, they had proposed under the Biden administration temperature safety guidelines. The Trump administration has pulled those back. So they're not going to do anything on the federal level. We definitely have to now do something on the state level.
And when it comes to potential threats on the federal level that might impact workers in the public sector, how should the state legislature be looking at protecting those workers?
So as chair of the Labor Committee, I've been meeting with state legislators across the country. Some of them are chairs of their respective labor committees. Some are just leaders in the area of labor. We have another meeting on Friday. We're looking, in New York State, we're in a decent position when it comes to what the federal government can do because of our Constitution that protects the right to collectively bargain, our Constitution that requires prevailing wages to be paid on public work sites, and things of that nature. And we've embedded a lot of things in our statutes as a result. So we're in decent position, but we're still could have problems. So I mentioned OSHA and the temp guidelines. So if the Trump administration continues to try to maneuver things in OSHA, which is the safety of workers, then we're going to have to do something here at the state level. The Trump administration did try to mess with, if you will, the National Relations Labor Board. He did it by removing one of the board members, which meant they no longer had a quorum. So if a collective bargaining disagreement or an organizing disagreement were to be contested, the board did not have a quorum at the federal level to review it. Fortunately, a few days ago, a court reinstated that board member. So those are the kind of things that we're going to continue to have to look at. I have, more broadly, have a lot of concerns as a member of the LGBTQ community. My community is under attack, especially trans individuals and gender nonconforming individuals are under attack. The Trump administration wants to do away with diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's my life's work. I operate under a mantra that no matter who you are, what you look like, where you come from, what your abilities, who you love, how you identify. We all have dignity, and with that dignity, we deserve equity, justice, and opportunities.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, Assemblymember. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
And we were speaking with Assemblymember Harry Bronson. And along with that tax credit, lawmakers are also pushing for a focus on higher education priorities this year. This comes at a time where there is a heightened fear over the future of the federal education department. Lawmakers are bracing themselves for what could be cuts to federal Pell Grants while also pushing for increased tuition assistance. Our Elise Klein has that story.
Higher education is one of several issues lawmakers are prioritizing in the state budget. It's also an issue facing challenges from Washington. President Donald Trump recently signed an executive order to dismantle the United States Department of Education. Some state lawmakers and state leaders worry about what this could mean for Pell Grants, federal assistance dollars many college students rely on to pay for housing, food, books, and other costs of attending college. About 112,000 of the students enrolled at SUNY rely on federal assistance through Pell Grants, out of 376,000 students as of 2024, which means nearly half of SUNY students need federal Pell Grants to pursue their degrees. SUNY Chancellor John King says as a public university, they're very concerned about the risk to Pell Grant funding.
Sadly, I think the reality is if there were to be significant federal cuts to the Pell Grant program, the state couldn't make up for the scale of need there. For SUNY alone, it's about $600 million a year in Pell Grant funding. So, the reality is if Congress goes along with proposed cuts to major federal programs, it will have dire consequences for New York.
Many state lawmakers are also concerned about potential cuts to education hurting New York's college students. State Senator Patricia Fahey, a Democrat representing parts of the Capital Region and a ranking member of the Senate Higher Education Committee, says she is incredibly frustrated with Washington and has deep concerns.
Any elimination there is penny wise, pound foolish, and quite frankly, I'm absolutely outraged that the president would even propose something so reckless, but we are seeing reckless proposals come out every single day.
Some state Republicans don't seem to be as worried. State Senator Joe Griffo, a Republican representing parts of Chenango, Oneida, and Madison counties, and a ranking member of the Higher Education Committee, says the legislature should focus on what they can control at the state level.
Yeah, I mean, any potential cut could have an impact, but we don't know at this point in time what, if any, cuts will be undertaken and what that would mean. So I think it's premature at this point in time to anticipate that.
Other Republican leaders agree. Assembly Minority Leader Will Barkley, representing parts of Oswego and Cuyahoga counties, says dismantling the United States Department of Education might not lead to Pell Grant cuts.
I mean, just because you dismantle the Department of Education doesn't mean funding can't come through in some other way. So let's see what the proposals are.
Meanwhile, State Senator Toby Ann Stavisky, a Democrat representing parts of Queens and the Higher Education Committee chair in the Senate, recalls going to Washington to see the legislation signed establishing the United States Department of Education with her husband, who was serving in the state legislature at the time. The senator says it's very worrying to watch it now become undone.
It's a tragedy, quite frankly, what's happening in Washington. I'm very concerned, not just about education, but the whole attitude is very troubling. People's civil rights are being dismantled.
New York Congressman Paul Tonko, representing parts of the Capital Region, says this measure is being done without thoughtfulness, and he has been pushing back. However, many questions still remain.
I want to know, we have written the acting secretary, attempted to meet with her by going to the department, but were locked out, literally locked out, at an entryway that was labeled all access entry. So how do you lock an all access entry? And I asked if it was just for Congress reps that the doors were locked. But nonetheless, wanting information, wanting to reach out with them to understand exactly what the theory is here and what the thinking is, if there is any thinking.
Tonko says Congress members need their questions answered, where the divisions within the Department of Education are going, what will be maintained, and what cuts will be made. Tonko, along with other New York congressional representatives, including Gerald Nadler, John Mannion, Nydia Velasquez, and Adriano Espaillat, signed onto a letter sent in early February to the acting Secretary of Education with these questions, but have not yet received an answer to their inquiry.
So these are answers that we're still searching for. My concern is it could dismantle and disrupt in a very big way what Washington does for education, and we should be a sound partner.
Some state leaders say this measure is really going to hurt New Yorkers. Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie, a Democrat representing parts of the Bronx, says the United States Department of Education gives New York significant sums of money.
So there are a lot of parts of this state and this nation that, voted for Donald Trump. I'm pretty sure they weren't expecting this type of stuff, but I always go back to saying elections have consequences. So now we're looking at $5 billion in Medicaid. I think the number might be $4 billion in education. Like, these are some numbers where I don't understand how people think that you're not really going to hurt people.
Other state leaders say all they can do is remain focused on what they can control.
So we are focused on supporting education. We think it's extremely important to success in life. And, there's just so much that we could be dodging on a federal level. I think that's very clear. We hear every day something else that may or may not be dismantled or, so we're working with the information we have now and leading with our values and our commitment to the things we care about.
In last year's state budget, lawmakers expanded eligibility for TAP, the Tuition Assistance Program, by expanding income eligibility and the highest award. This year, they made a similar effort by expanding the number of credits needed for part-time students to become eligible for TAP funding. SUNY Chancellor King says although last year's efforts in Albany were tremendous for students, there are still needs to increase TAP.
So the state's committed to TAP, continues to invest in TAP. Could we see TAP grow even further? Of course, we'd love to see that. There's still a gap between what TAP and Pell provide and the total cost of attendance, particularly when students are living on campus at our four-year institutions, because then you've got tuition, fees, and room and board. So continuing to invest in college affordability, critical for New York State's future.
Stavisky says lawmakers will be fighting for changes to programs that go along with TAP to address college affordability. The senator says they are hoping to see in the final budget a restoration to the governor's $9 million cuts to opportunity programs such as HEOP, the Higher Education Opportunity Program.
All of these opportunity programs enabled students who come from limited families with limited income. They can go to college. They're the first in their families to go to college. And the State University and the City University of New York. They are the vehicles by which they achieve upward mobility.
The Senate One-House budget resolution included a restoration and additional dollars for these programs. Some state lawmakers are also pushing to once again tie TAP awards with SUNY tuition, which was decoupled in 2012, but it's not going to be an easy fight.
Yes, we'd love to see it coupled. It's just all of these things cost money. If we're going to have the rug pulled out from under us at the federal level, it is going to make it much harder. But yes, we must keep telling students we have their back.
State Assemblymember Joanne Simon, a Democrat representing parts of Brooklyn, says at a time when the economy is potentially headed for another recession and many changes at the federal level, the fight for this measure will be more challenging, especially with the potential of the TAP gap to grow beyond what the state can cover.
Tuition may be going up, but we have less ability to make up that difference, right? And when you add that up together across a system, it's a lot of money, right?
While lawmakers and the executive office negotiate these budget items for higher education, there could be discussions about increasing TAP assistance and Bundy aid. However, Senator Stavisky says lawmakers' focus has shifted.
But this year, the emphasis, I think, is shifting somewhat to capital. We put a lot of money in there for SUNY and CUNY for capital, not just for new buildings, but also for critical maintenance, because many of those buildings are old.
Some university leaders say capital is needed to continue plans to make college more affordable. For example, the governor put forth a proposal to make community college free for students ages 25 to 55 in high-demanding occupations, including nursing, teaching, technology, and engineering. Some Republican lawmakers have critiqued this proposal, saying it is too restrictive. Assemblymember Ed Robb, representing parts of Nassau County and a ranking member of the Ways and Means Committee, says opening up the program could better address affordability.
I think people wanted to see a little more flexibility with regard to that, whether it's just targeting those fields and not necessarily having the age restrictions, or maybe opening up a little more in terms of what fields are included.
SUNY Chancellor King says to make a proposal like this successful, there are needs to address for community colleges' operations, which includes their basic operating aid. SUNY is asking for a $30 million increase to their operational aid, which in the governor's proposal is listed as maintaining the community college funding floor at about $80 million.
It's important for them to have the capacity to develop these high-demand workforce areas. And so we've been talking with the legislature about key investments in community colleges to increase their capacity to have programs that match regional economic needs.
In the Senate One-House budget proposal, lawmakers increased community college funding by about $5 million. Stavisky says she would like to see those additional dollars grow in the final state budget.
Community colleges, I think, are the future of higher education.
State lawmakers are also hoping to see in the final budget more funding for SUNY Downstate. Last year, the university hospital faced threats of shutting down after years of financial strain. But about $400 million in dedicated funding in last year's budget prevented that from happening. This year's executive budget proposal from the governor's office includes $100 million in funding. In the One-House budget resolution, state lawmakers proposed increasing aid to around $250 million. Some state lawmakers, like Assemblymember Brian Cunningham, a Democrat representing parts of Brooklyn and including SUNY Downstate, says he wants to see the final budget reflect the highest amount possible for the university hospital. He says some lawmakers are trying to push for $1 billion, which many advocates say is what is needed to keep the hospital running efficiently.
it seems very clear from the residents that they enjoy their hospital in terms of the medical staff, the professionals, the service they receive, but they can all agree that the hospital is falling apart and it needs to be some infrastructure improvements to it. So we're excited about the new Capitol and looking forward to seeing how high we can go.
However, some Republicans across the aisle say the state legislature needs to share the wealth. Senator Griffo says he is concerned about the Upstate University Medical Center in his district.
I understand there's a unique challenge downstate medical centers facing. I respect that, and I know that there has to be resources allocated. But Upstate University Hospital has similar and could become much more challenged in the future. So my point is, why not provide additional funds for them too? We should look at it together collectively and be supportive right now to both.
Griffo says lawmakers should be allocating more than the $200 million allocation listed in the governor's budget. Lawmakers' one House budget proposals included $250 million total for upstate medical this year. Lawmakers are just days away at this point from the due date of the final state budget, where we will see those final numbers for proposals like SUNY Upstate, SUNY Downstate, and TAP funding. Legislative leaders and the governor's office are still undergoing negotiations, but some lawmakers say we could see closer to an on-time budget this year due to a lack of policy and significant controversy in the budget. We'll be monitoring the budget process as it unfolds. Elise Klein, New York Now.
And for more on those higher education priorities, you can visit our website. That's at nynow.org. You can also subscribe to our newsletter by going to newsletter.nynow.org. Well, that does it for this edition of New York Now. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next week.
Funding for New York Now is provided by WNET,